data as a value chain. So even before I introduce myself, I have a kind request. If you're at the back, in church, they say, please move closer to the front. So it's possible to just move like a step forward, so that whoever is coming in won't struggle coming to the front. So. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes, thank you. Much better, as you've seen. So the cozier, the better. Yes. So say hi to your neighbor, ask them who they are, what are their expectations, and the likes. So perhaps I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Tevin Gitonga, and I work at GIZ, the German Development Corporation, at the Digital Transformation Center, where I head the data governance program. And I'm going to be co-facilitating this with my colleague and friend, Milo.
Yes, thank you very much, Tevin. My name is Milo Vamilka. I work for the EU delegation here in Kenya, and I lead all of our work on digitalization. Thank you for joining us for this, hopefully, dynamic discussion. We are not going for stylized presentations, but we hope to interact mostly. So get ready to raise your hand, speak, and contribute actively. Tevin, you want to take us through the...
Yes. So as you've heard, today it's interactive, so I may pick on you randomly. So for example, I may pick up on the gentleman back there on his phone and ask him a question. So that's the whole purpose of this panel. It's not really designed to have the usual people sitting there telling you. It's more we want to hear your views of the topic at hand, which is data value chains. So I think you've heard of different value chains. You've heard of a coffee value chain. You've heard of a tea value chain in Kenya. But what if we had a data value chain? How would that look like from top down? If you look at it from the perspectives of how data flows, if you look at it from the business perspectives, if you look at it from the infrastructure. Because if you look at digital has layers. There's a service layer, there's an infrastructure layer. So today's idea is just to have a conversation on, can we create a new value chain out of this? And how does that look like for EU Kenya in terms of business? So we are going to cover different topics today, but they're all interlinked. Somehow we'll link them. The first one will be on data flows. The second will be on BPO sector and ICT services. I think today in the morning, there was someone who talked about how they're providing services to the EU. I think it was a Belgian company. Then we're also going to have, he's right there. Yes. And then we're also going to have a discussion on secure infrastructure, what ties this all up. And it's meant to just be an interaction. And before we go to that, I think we'll start with some of the statistics of what you're seeing. What is EU Kenya, what are they doing, and yes, what are some of the opportunities?
Yes, Tevin. You might wonder, well, how is this all connected? In the morning, for who was here, you heard a lot about how the EU is basically the largest export market for Kenyan goods, right? And how we have the economic partnership in place, which is a strategic framework for investment, for trade between the EU and Kenya. At the moment, there is also another strategic process that is ongoing. And the EU and Kenya are engaged in a dialogue working towards the integration of data markets through the adequacy dialogue, which we hope potentially will result in an adequacy decision. Now, this obviously facilitates data flows between the two markets, which results in concrete business opportunities. That's especially for potentially the BPO sector, Kenyan companies exporting services to the European Union, for example. And then you have basically the trusted data flows on the basis of a harmonized regulatory framework. But then we ask the question, well, what about the underlying infrastructure? How do we create secure networks to exchange these data? So that's how we tie the three topics together. We want to explore concrete opportunities, investment opportunities, business opportunities in these three areas with you today. And to kick us off, Tevin?
So to kick us off, we'll have a number of presentations. And the whole idea will be, after those presentations, we open it up to the floor. So you'll just react to those presentations. There are a few people in the room who I know, so I'll pick on them intentionally. And even if I don't know you, I may pick on you, or Milu may pick on you. And it's just to introduce the topics, see what the various entities are doing from different perspectives. Then now we just open it up for a conversation. So in light of that, we have 3 presentations. One is from Emrys, from Caribou Digital. The other one is from Jonathan, of Genesis Analytics and Outsourcing Association of Kenya. And we have one from Mustafa Salah from Nokia. So with that, we'll just first start with the presentations, starting with Emrys' presentation, which is going to be on data flows. As I've said, so bear with me, look at it like a thread. So we start on data flows, we go BPO, we go infrastructure. Then by the end of this whole conversation will be tying all of them up. Yeah, thank you. So
Emrys and team, please join us.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And team very much with...
Grace? Yes.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Tevin. Thank you, Milu. So my name is Emrys Shoemaker. I'm with Caribou Digital. We're a small consulting firm. And we've been asked to look at really, we know that data flows matter. We know that this makes a difference for business, but to look at in what way does it matter, to put numbers to some of those questions. So what we've been looking at is what the economic value of data flows are, really putting numbers on that. And we've got 2 really strong colleagues with us. We've got Grace, and online we also have, I hope, Asha. And with our research, what we're doing is we're looking at essentially 4 things. We're looking at how do you measure quantitatively what the economic value of data flows is on job creation, as Tevin was saying, specifically in the BPO and ITO sector. We're going to hear more on that shortly in the next presentation. And also looking at what the impact, the economic value of the free flow of personal data is, and also looking at what the free flow of data under trusted regulations. What does it mean when you have a regulatory framework that can enable data flow in a trusted manner? I'm going to turn to Grace to walk us through what some of the knowledge that we've been generating so far with the first bit of that research.
Thank you. So we looked at some studies that try to answer the question, what changes in the economy and by what value is there growth, for example, in the GDP, when you have data flows in a country. And some studies show that when you have connectivity and agreement, there's up to 4.3% in trade in goods. Other studies show that when there are data sharing agreements, there's up to 5% growth in GDP. There are also other studies that show that when there are trusted data flows in a country, there is up to 4% growth in productivity and also up to 5% growth in trade in services. And another interesting economic figure is this idea of the club effect, which basically means that when there is, let's say, an adequacy decision, for example, between the EU and a country, those countries that have adequacy decisions also trade amongst themselves. So it's sort of like a little club where, apart from trading with the EU, they also trade amongst themselves, and that also leads to some growth in trade. Some studies show up to 4.5%. And very quickly, just to bring us to the same page, I'm sure for most of you who are experts here, I'll just talk about, for the case of Kenya, where we are today, what are some of the instruments that we use in cross-border data flows. At the moment, we have our dear Data Protection Act. Yes, hi Oscar and other friends, which is the key regulation that governs how, especially personal data, flows out of the country. And there are also regulations under the Kenya Data Protection Act that give more detail on how data handlers are obligated to take care of data as they are processing it out of the country. There is also registration. Data handlers, whether you're a controller or a processor, are required to register themselves. And for government entities, there is now a data sharing code where it regulates how data is to be shared among different entities. We also have some rules on cross-border data transfers. Anyone who was in Kenya in, I think it was 2017 election, we had the whole issue about where the servers were. And so by the time the law was being made, there was a requirement on certain data that has to be localized in the country. For example, sensitive civil registration, election, and public finance data. But generally, the country allows cross-border data transfer if there is proof of that the other country the data is going to has adequate data protection standards, and that, or sometimes you can use the consent if the data subject consents, or contractual. You can rely on contracts. We are really excited that there is this potential, or there is this discussion or dialogue between Kenya and the EU that would facilitate even further data flows between Kenya and the EU. And apart from this ongoing adequacy discussion, I think we'll hear more about other ongoing discussions, for example, within the East African region and also in the continent. I think I want to turn over to my colleague online if you're able to put him on, because between Kenya and the EU. And apart from this ongoing adequacy discussion, I think we'll hear more about other ongoing the continent. I think I want to turn over to my colleague online if you're able to put him on, because between Kenya and the EU. And apart from this ongoing adequacy discussion,
looks like we're hearing you twice.
We have a
for those who have not paid attention
happening right now.
Asha, can you hear us?
Voices.
Yes, we can hear you as well.
You're able to put him on, because between Kenya and the EU. And apart from this ongoing adequacy discussion,
looks like we're hearing you twice.
We have a
for those who have not paid attention
happening right now.
Asha, can you hear us?
It appears that the voice is echoing back to me.
We can hear you perfectly right now. Please, you can take the floor.
Okay. So the screen is sharing. If you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Ashur. I'm working on this project as an economist and data scientist. I'll briefly share some of the initial results from our preliminary economic modeling of trusted data flows and open digital ecosystem in the Kenyan context. We have used a three-pronged approach in our modeling. First, we rely on credible global studies and papers, including those published by the World Bank, OECD, and World Economic Forum. Second, we ground and extrapolate our findings from the literature review, which Grace also mentioned, to the Kenyan macroeconomic data. Lastly, we adopt a conservative lens using modest estimates and presenting our findings in ranges. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So first and more broadly, our analysis suggests that trusted cross-border data flows can boost Kenyan GDP by up to 5%. Now, this impact can be understood in terms of different focus areas. And one of the major focus areas that we identified is trade or exports. Now, we estimate that the digital connectivity, first let me define digital connectivity in this economic modeling context. We define here as the ability to move, access, and use data across borders. And this is flourished by regulation as well as infrastructure and technology. Now, this digital connectivity can raise Kenya's trade, according to our model's estimates, by up to 3.45%, which is over $400 million in current terms. Of course, now we expect that the most immediate and the most significant impact of this trade focus area is gonna be on the BPO sectors, ICT, or the commercial services sector. Those that are most reliant on data and data flows. Next slide. So we have also modeled other broader economic effects. Due to better efficiency from data use, we estimate that improved data flows can boost productivity by 0.3% to 0.9%. Now, in per employed person GDP terms, this can be around $100 per GDP person. Also, downstream prices are expected to reduce by 0.15% to 0.45% annually. These prices are the ones that are faced by consumers, for example, when they look at menu or when they go to retail. We also estimate that the government tax revenue could grow by up to almost 6%. This amounts to approximately $900 million in current terms. Next slide, please. Thank you. Beyond those headline figures that I just mentioned, we also estimate increase in business revenue, FDI, and new jobs. Again, I would like to highlight that we can safely reason here that these indicators would have the major impact on specific sectors, those sectors which are most reliant on data or which are formed around data flows, such as the BPO sector. Next slide. Thank you. So I'll just stop here by giving a key takeaway of this. We estimate our modeling suggests that the stronger, more open digital ecosystem benefits everyone in Kenya. And because developing countries can often catch up faster, in economics we call this the convergence effect, which says that developing countries have a higher marginal return to any input they give, whether it's regulation or infrastructure or technology. So given that, we expect that Kenya's actual gains may be on the higher end of our estimates. Thank you so much. That's my part. I'll go back to Amris.
Thanks, Asha, and thanks, Grace. I think I'm going to be very brief because we have a lot to get through, but I just want to make 2 points. I mean, one is that we know from existing research that we can model the economic value of data flows, and it's significant. The second point is the significance is, as Asha said at the end, it's throughout the economy. So it's revenue for the state, it's economic growth in industry in the private sector, and it's jobs and prices that people pay for goods. So it really does translate into a really comprehensive effect across the economy. And finally, the third point, I said there were two, but there's a bonus. Critical to it is not just infrastructure, which is absolutely necessary, connectivity, etc., as we'll hear, but also the regulatory effect as well, making sure that there are the accountable mechanisms in place for businesses to trust that they can share data in ways that are legal, accountable, and mandated. I'll stop there. We have great presentations to follow, so thank you all for your time, and thank you for the opportunity to share the research.
Thank you very much, Amris and Grace and Ashar. Very impressive, a 5% increase in GDP potentially from trusted cross-border data flows. The study is in its final stages. We'll be wrapping it up and obviously be making it available also for wider sharing. So that is still to come. Now let's look at the concrete opportunities stemming from that. I'm inviting Jonathan Beersley from Genesis Analytics Program Director to take us through some of the opportunities in the BPO sector.
BPO and ITO, there's actually still more jobs in the domestic. So think Safaricom, Airtel, call centers, that kind of stuff. But of course you have Teleperformance, a multi-billion-dollar European conglomerate that's publicly listed. That's also here. Well, why are they here? Well, they're here because of a massive amount of using the Common European Framework of Languages, a massive amount of English speakers that can speak B2 level or above at a really neutral accent. So Kenya's kind of dominated internationally by, and you can go to the next, well, the only thing I'll say here is that we've got 2% of global demand right now being captured by Africa. It actually went up to almost 3% recently. And a lot of it has to do with the cost pressures in the Philippines and Mexico and other places where you're looking at fully loaded costs around, let's say, $600 maybe for a call center agent. In Kenya, it's much closer to $300. So then it becomes this question of, well, why aren't there more jobs? And of course, we'll look at that slide. We'll look at sort of the barriers slide. But a lot of it comes down to people in corp dev or COOs that are making sourcing location decisions. They're not even thinking about Africa. And if they are, they're thinking about Egypt or South Africa. So can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so no, you can stay there. You can stay there. So as I mentioned, you have these mature markets that really are, they're not necessarily that mature in relation to India, but they're mature in an African context, and they have what I would call like a full stack of outsourcing services. So in South Africa, AWS is going to be there, Google's going to be there, you have data centers, all this good stuff, right? In Kenya, we're just coming out of sort of this initial globally being recognized as a place to do this stuff. And so it's really important that data is part of the, just de-risking all this. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, this is a snapshot of the Kenyan market. Of course, this is a very attractive industry just for sole purposes of the fact that it's got a ton of women in it, young women. Everybody's trying to solve for that. MasterCard Foundation recently, I think, raised their target again in terms of the percentage of women that they actually, need to benefit from their programs. Youth is an extremely high number. I think it's 89% youth in Kenya, and that's true across the whole continent. And the other thing I would say, and I know I don't have all the time in the world. So the other thing that I would say is around impact sourcing, right? Is impact sourcing is incredibly important for economies like South Africa and like Kenya, for young people who've never had a formal job before, right? So you have to anchor somehow the digital experience of people in a formal job where they have work experience, right? Next slide. Sometimes the PowerPoint comes out well, and sometimes it doesn't. So when you go into mature GBS economies, they're always going to have a very crisp value proposition for any investor that's looking at it. So Kenya, I'm not going to go through all of these, but without question, it's costs, it's young people, it's the talent, the English-speaking ability, and so forth that is really capturing a lot of multinationals in terms of what they're looking for. And so it's important too, Kenya advertises itself in this way. So we go out and we say, this is what the sector's doing, this is how it matches up against South Africa, this is how it matches up against Colombia, etc. Next slide. Okay, so in Kenya today, we've got some major operators, as I said. We've got Teleperformance. CCI is known for being a pioneer in the sector, so they're often first to the party. So in Rwanda, they're early. In Ethiopia, they're early. But as you can see, there's major brands that are being sourced, that are being serviced out of Kenya. We're seeing more and more Fortune 500 companies that are being worked with out of Kenya, and I anticipate, as I said about the growth rate, that continuing to grow at like 20% year over year. But there's so much that we could do to accelerate that. Next slide. So we did a study for GIZ, and basically mapped the amount of ICT professionals in Kenya against what the German market is looking for. We found that 1.9 million people in Kenya work in ICT, which is a huge number, but so many of them are not working for global companies, right? They don't have maybe a certification in cybersecurity or whatever it may be, right? But as you can see, there's 700,000 unfulfilled jobs just in Germany. I think we just have one more. Yeah. So when we look at why this is happening, you have opportunities and obviously you have barriers. Huge amount of negative or even no perceptions about the African market when it comes to ITO. We all think about the Philippines, we think about India. The skilling programs are getting a lot better. I have friends that are doing skilling in this room, and everybody has got the memo, right, that you can't just train people to become freelancers and hope that they go online and make a bunch of money. You have to anchor it somewhere, and GBS is a great place to do that. We are also working with the government of Kenya on specific incentives and regulations. They're going to match what Rwanda is doing, what South Africa is doing, etc. That's it. Questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are getting there. So now we've seen what data flows can create in terms of economic value. We've seen practically what's happening in terms of the companies that are there. But to underline all that, I think you need a secure pathway. Because whether we like it or not, data is going to flow to enable these BPO activities. And you're one mistake away from your data ending up in the wrong hands. So with that, we'll have Mustafa to just give us a brief presentation before we open up the floor.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for the energetic discussion today. I think my presentation will be easier with all the data that have been shared so far. I think it's impressive, let's say, inputs that is already shared, and I think this is reconfirming at least the presentation, or at least the view how we see it from technology point of view and infra point of view. Maybe we move to the, hopefully the technology will not fail us today. Then, good. Okay. Okay. Good. Let me maybe go a little bit. I think the presentation is.
Don't get dizzy.
Yes, that's the target, by the way. Okay, good. Let me start quickly just to explain what we are observing today in Kenya from data point of view. And as you see, you don't see it so far? Okay, good. Let me start by the data as a strategic infra. And this is where, when you go to the Kenya today, we have been observing a lot of increase in the data. And that's data today, if you compare it with the normal natural resource, the data is getting the importance when it's flowing. And that's why when you look to Kenya today, and this is what we have been observing the past 4 years, that the data is keep growing and it's doubling. And when you go to the next 4 years, it's a doubling with the same data. And this is going with the different technologies, going from the 2G in the past, today with the data, with the 5G, there is no limitation. And we are talking also about the 6G that is coming soon. Then the data itself is not something that is luxury, it's become a necessity in our life. When you go to the, yeah, okay. Last thing. Good. Let me go to the data as a driver of digital. I think I prepared this slide based on the analysis and the statistic that we have been observing, but I think Achar was presenting very detailed data on it. The 5% is very impressive, by the way. And that's why when you go to the cross-border data and you see a little bit in Kenya how things are moving, and if I taking from the digital economy today and looking to the main 4 areas, like the ICT sector, where the telecom domain is going fast, when you go to the fintech, e-health, and BPO, I think the things are moving very fast on that level. But to go on that, Kenya, why Kenya today is considered as a major hub for it? From position point of view, from the way how we see things now moving on the, oops, sorry, sound glitch. Okay, sorry. Now, how we see Kenya today, because when you look to the different fiber optic provider, when you look to the hyperscale, Meta, Amazon today, they are the one that are looking to Kenya as a potential case from stability, from the way how the skills in the country are moving well, and how the regulator is moving on that sense. But before going there, how the data should be flowing and what is necessity for the data to be important for it. First of all, it's a high-speed broadband where you will be having the data going very fast in the real time, which is very important for that. Second, the cloud-native architecture and the edge computing. The difference between them is how you are saving your data centrally with the cloud, and second, how you are going to the last tail with the edge computing. And this is where we see things are moving today. And this is where there is a potential in Kenya to move on that sense. But nothing can be done without the trust, without having this secure data flow where you have a cybersecurity as a major part of it. And this is where what you need today, it's mega data center, flow with a high speed, third, the security. We are taking always the case of when you have a nice car, very speedy car, but you don't have the right road. Then that will damage everything. Then you will not be getting benefit of it. And what Nokia is doing for that, we are proud in Nokia, and by the way, in Nokia we're using one of the motto, which is we are creating the technology that help people to act together. From 5G technology that we are leading on the worldwide and also in Africa where we are growing fast. Second, on the optic and IP transport with the mega module and where we are able to move fast on that infra, and also with the cloud, or the data center and the cloud enabling, where we have very potential cases that is moving now in Africa with a secure and very flow. Going also to the AI, which is driven in cybersecurity today, if you have the data flowing without, and you know that's without having the security on that level, you will be having a lot of risks and concerns. If you don't have an AI and cybersecurity that is moving faster than whoever is going to play with that data, that it will be a trouble. Now, you have the technology, you have the equipment, but you need the resources that they are going to manage it. And this is where the SME is playing a big role in it. Today you can create on the BPO part where you still need to have the skills, and this is where, as a Nokia, we are doing lab in Kenya, and we are enabling the people because we are proud. So far in Nokia, Kenya at 80% local people, they have the skills, they are capable to do all that job by themselves. Now, if you go to the what is needed and what is the benefit that Kenya will get? Attracting the FDI on that, which is very important, but there is a requirement for it, which is more about having the secure data on it and having the flow of the data going from country to country. And second is growth in the BBU and digital export, and this is what you have been observing. I think the statistic is very clear on that sense. And from that perspective, this will need growth in the export in the country, and it will flow in that sense. Oops. Okay. Last one is the SME, as I was mentioning. And today, if you see from the statistic, I was trying to get more statistic than what Asher was sharing, but we see that the ICT today in Kenya is covering 120 million in 2023, and we see that it will be doubling in the next 2 or 3 years. And this is giving the potential of the local people that they can serve outside the country itself. What is needed to manage this one? Simply, we have been trying to summarize this in 4 points. First is regulatory harmonization, where we see there is a gap on it. And we have been observing this on our daily activities. We have been observing this wherever we are interacting with our customer. And in general, our observation in the country, there is a regulation that should be strong to attract the FDI on that sense. Second is the infrastructure investment. I think there is a lot of improvement happened the past years. But still, we are not yet. From data center, from fiber presence. And by the way, one of the examples when you see the latency and the communication that happened now with Asher. And that's one of the examples where we need to move faster. Third one is the cybersecurity, which is very important. Today, having the flow of data between the countries, the most important is the security of that data. And I think in the beginning of the presentation, Grace, you have been mentioning about the election and the concerns on how to ensure that this security is there, which is very important. Fourth point is more about digital skills, where we see it in Kenya, it's very attractive from language point of view, from skills of people point of view, and from our own experience as international companies. This is how we are summarizing how Kenya will be ready for the next period and the interaction with the EU on that data flow. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. Thank you for highlighting the importance of cybersecurity, security of the infrastructure that underpins our data flows. That's also something we, and our infrastructure, that's also something we invest in increasingly as European Union. We work with our European Development Finance institutions. You've heard from the EIB this morning under the Global Gateway to actually invest in infrastructure in Kenya and actually across the continent. And this specifically, the focus on secure connectivity, secure infrastructure is an important pillar of that. We're also going to hear later from our colleagues from Ericsson, also working in this same space. Now it is, now I'm lucky, I get to pick on someone. And I see a very close partner of us here in the room. I see Oscar Otieno from the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. We have worked very closely over the last few years, of course. I'm wondering, how does ODPC and how does government work with companies to help facilitate cross-border data flows, either in the region and, of course, with Europe more broadly?
Yes, thank you, Milo. Thank you for that question. Actually, for government, the work of the government is to provide an enabling environment for businesses to thrive in. And now that you're talking about data flows, it's the work of the government to provide that environment an enabling environment where data can freely flow between Kenya and other jurisdictions. So lots of initiatives are being done by the government. First of all, I'll start with, I'll look at it from the gateways, the 4 gateways that are there. Government is there to make sure that these gateways are up and running throughout. Nobody would want to come and invest or start business when these gateways are shut down and all that. So the gateways are there. Then we have also make sure that there is redundancy throughout. Again, in terms of infrastructure, and I've seen a lot of presentation on infrastructure, the government is also not left behind. So we are also making sure that we are having infrastructure such as a state-of-the-art data center at Konza, so that anyone who has businesses outside and wants to come and set up and can't really find its foot, then the government can give you that enabling environment to start off and do your things. And then again, as Grace said, we provide that legal and regulatory framework where you can easily operate in. So she mentioned about the Data Protection Act. Yes, the Data Protection Act will really put in place measures of how you can freely transfer data between one country and the other. She's talked about the adequacy decision. When I'm looking at these presentations, the pressure is almost building on me. Since I'm leading this, the person was leading since left it for me to be leading this adequacy, and I'm seeing the need now to really up my game in terms of attaining this and fast tracking, to use your words, fast tracking the adequacy decision. So we really hope that this is something that will come up really quickly. Again, in terms of businesses, what we can do, what we are doing as government is also helping people in various sectors, helping build guidelines and guidance notes, specific guidance notes, and over and above that, we also do advisory. So if you are setting up businesses, you want to transfer data, you are not sure of what you're doing, even up to last week Friday, we saw advisories being asked, I'm a startup, I want to take my data to China, can I do that? Then we advise you on all those safeguards that you need to put in place in the absence of an adequacy decision. Thank you so much, Miloy.
Thank you very much. So I just want to do a quick statistics in the room. How many have a startup? How many run a startup? So how many of you are required to transfer data in and out of Kenya? Don't worry, he won't punish you. And you've had this potential on that. So I've seen a number of you have startups, but I'm curious to know, how is it for you so far? You know, how is it transferring data? We've seen the potential that it has, the 5%. What's the experience like on data flows? What is the challenges we've had? There's some rules. So I'm going to pick on 3 people who I noticed on the room. I'll start with the ones I know. How are you transferring data in or outside the country?
Thank you very much, Tevin. So again, my name is Mtembe Karuki, co-founder and CEO of a startup called Fastaga. And essentially what we do is we are working on building infrastructure for privacy-preserving machine learning. So how do you actually do machine learning and AI on private data? You know, we are doing also research on that, and for us, it's like a global marketplace. It's not only Kenya. So for us, it's like, you know, we need to be working with, you know, data in Tanzania or data in South Korea or data in Germany. And, you know, of course, we are very compliant with ODPC. You know, even before we got to the 5 million revenue, we of course had to get the certificates both of data controller and data processor. And then of course, you know, the opportunity actually in our sector exists because of the EU regulations around, you know, the AI Act and also the GDPR. Right? And interestingly, our connection also with Europe comes from, you know, it's actually a European investor who saw the opportunity in this kind of technology. So actually the first investor we ever had was a Swiss VC. And I think one of the unique opportunities that we saw within the African context is that, you know, we don't have very powerful 5G that is ubiquitous. We don't have very powerful internet that is ubiquitous. So we actually had to find the ways of running AI on devices on the edge. You know, our colleague from Nokia talked about edge AI, and we started figuring out that we actually had to work in that space of edge AI. And so we saw that because of the constraints we had as Kenya, we had to build that technology, and we are realizing now more and more, because of the regulations that have come around privacy, that technology is needed globally. So for us, we decided to focus on that side of how do you process most of the data. Like if it's, you know, personal identifiable information, all that is processed whether you're using machine learning on device. So we built infrastructure that can actually run a lot of these processes. Right now we have a partnership on mobile money, which is very PII data, and so all that is processed on device and does not necessarily have to go to the cloud, because most of our clouds, if you're using GCP or Amazon right now, most of the data is actually live in Kenya, right? Not so many people have proper regulations around that, right? There are a few other co-location sites here in Kenya, but unless you choose that, most of the data is either going to Germany or somewhere else. So that means there's more and more need to figure out how do we build either more edge servers in different institutions on the continent or in the countries. How do we have those sort of data agreements, data flow agreements between countries? If, for example, I'm a startup here and I want to actually be delivering a service to a Brussels-based entity or a Czech-based entity. Right now, I actually don't know how to actually do that without breaking some laws, right? But for us, we are doing it because we are focused on edge machine learning and AI, right?
I'm curious to know are you breaking any laws? Because earlier on you said you provide businesses to Brussels entities and EU companies. So perhaps you can help Mutembei and everyone else.
Now, when I raised my hand, I didn't think it was for this, but very compliant. Us, we do the opposite, because we build startups for European companies as well as in South Africa, where we often work with quite sensitive data. For example, one of the startups we build in South Africa does electricity vending. So selling electricity in Johannesburg and other areas of South Africa, and you're dealing with a lot of very personal information that is then between those two countries. In Europe also we have startups that handle quite a lot of sensitive information, such as transaction data and stuff like that. So you have to really be very careful about these things. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I do have lawyers, so they are typically the ones who help me figure out those processes. And we do spend a lot of attention on that, especially GDPR compliance, as well as compliance in South Africa with the regulations there. So I don't have much to say on this, except that we do take it very seriously, and that we work with professionals for that.
Yes, thank you very much, Tevin. I want to just highlight an opportunity, as EU and Germany and GIZ, we are working intensively to support Kenya in its digital transformation. And one of the opportunities that we have coming up is it's a webinar on data protection compliance for EU companies. In case that's of interest, I see Oscar nodding. Please come to us. We can share more information with you should you be interested in participating. Now, let's move on a bit again onto the business opportunities. When we started working towards adequacy with Kenya, we were initially purely focused on that. And we worked closely with our member states, and it was actually Germany who was the first one to point out, hey, actually, we have companies in Germany interested in the BPO industry in Kenya. And that's why I would like to invite the deputy ambassador of Germany to say a few words on this particular opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Milou, and good afternoon to all of you. Thanks for organizing this really very good discussion to the EU, but also to GIZ, who have been involved. You have already mentioned GIZ or the German government through GIZ and the EU delegation work very closely in the field of digital transformation, but also BPO and other sectors. And the reason why we do this in Germany is the average age in Germany is, I think, 42, 43 now. Here in Kenya, it's 19 years. And from this big gap in our societies, we have to draw some conclusions, and one is that we actually, our society gets older and older and older, and young talents are missing in Germany. So we have two ways of filling the gap. One is to invite young talents to come to Germany and work in German companies, hospitals, and other sectors. But in the digital sphere, I think it's more of a win-win situation if people stay in the country where they come from and actually do what we are talking about, ITO and BPO, and that's why we think this is really an area, and we want to focus our development cooperation also more and more in those areas where we think there is a win-win situation for Germany, but also, of course, for the country we are cooperating with, and that's why GIZ is very much involved in business process outsourcing through the Digital Transformation Center. We have another desk that is called Import Promotion Desk. They work on business process outsourcing. We have a digital dialogue with Kenya, where we try to involve private companies to tell both sides, the German side but also the Kenyan side, where are the shortcomings, where are the challenges, what is very helpful, and draw conclusions out of that will also help to boost this sector. And we see more and more German companies actually coming to Kenya, investigating the environment here. Not all of them stay here. Some obviously see better chances in other countries, and that also should give us motivation to look at actually where are still the challenges in this country. And yes, there are probably some that are sector specific for BPO. And also on the European side, we have to work on the adequacy decision. We should also think about, that was also mentioned this morning, about adding a chapter to the EPA concerning services. I think that would also be a big boost. But on the Kenyan side, apart from the sector-specific shortcomings that you probably know much better than I do, it's also the general business environment that is important. If you want to invest in a company here, if you want to hire people, you have to be sure that the regulations stay as they are. You have to be sure about the taxes and all that. The European, under the guidance of the European delegation, we have set up a 10-point paper that we have presented to the president of Kenya to highlight the challenges that we see that have to be solved in order to bring up more investment in whatever sector. It's not a specific paper for one sector, but for the whole economy of Kenya. So I think there are big opportunities, and German companies are coming slowly, but the interest is high. And if we together with the Kenyan side do our homework, I think it can really go up very quickly. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Alexander. You spoke of the enabling environment, and that's definitely critical. I know we have Director Kyria from the Ministry of ICT here with us. Could you share a bit about what is the ministry doing to help create this enabling environment and boost the BPO sector in Kenya?
Thank you, Milo, for that, and thank you for even all the speakers. I think Kenya here is on the spot, and marketing is one part of it, because we can have the data, but we all of us know monetizing that data is the tricky bit, because how do you make money from the data? So, and that's where, of course, forums like this one come in. So in terms of government creating the enabling environment, that's very key, basically, because you can have all the infrastructure, you can have all the, broadband working, but if the customer or the client are not comfortable bringing their business to Kenya because they imagine, I'm not sure my data is safe, for example, I'm not sure my interests are protected, because a lot of maybe customers or clients have proprietary information we are really going out full blast. If you have looked in the past maybe 3 years, we are developing so many policies, strategies, and even amending a lot of the entire spectrum of the ICT regulations. I think the last time we had serious amendments on ICT regulations was like 25 years ago. So this year we have all the regulations in the ICT sector on the table for amendment. And this is basically to provide that enabling environment. In terms of digital, labor or digital space, or the digital economy, as we call it, then this is a new sector that requires a lot of regulations to build trust, especially when you are discussing cross-border data interchange. You have to have the interoperability frameworks working. You have to have the adequacy agreements. You have to have the data sharing corridors. So all these things are bilateral, and a lot of it has to be done again at government-to-government level. So we are doing a lot of that. That's why we have the digital dialogues in place, not only with the European Union, but also with other governments. So in terms of government being, key to providing that enabling environment, I think for us is an opportunity that we have really taken head on, and we are engaging the sector. This year, I think, is the most engaged stakeholder. In terms of stakeholder engagement, it's one of the most engaged areas, apart from the areas we know of. So we really want to hear, what do you need as a customer? We really want to hear, what do you need as a supplier? We really want to hear, what do you need as a government, so that we can engage at that level and be able to create the avenue. So the other avenue we are also looking at is, how do we position Kenya as a regional gateway again? Because when you look at Kenya, we are geographically located not only to serve ourselves internally, but we can at most serve 16 countries who are our neighbors by extension. So if we are able to position ourselves in that critical nature, then we are able to monetize the data within our region, and we can start reaping the benefits. Thank you, Milo.
Thank you. So I think we're hearing what government is doing, but I'm curious now, before I see the Deputy CEO of KEPSA is here, but before we hear from KEPSA, I'm curious, how many of you have tried the ITO BPO service and they've tried to access the EU market? Has anyone tried to access the EU market in there? Okay, apart from you, who else? Okay, I'm curious to know, what's your experience like when you're trying to access the market?
My name is Mercy, and I run the CEO of Adept Technologies Limited. On our own, it's almost impossible to access the EU market. But there are clients who have found us online though, and so through our website or social media, and they've reached out to us. But starting last year, we are part of a program run by GIZ under Import Promotion Desk. And the program was to equip and expose local companies to German companies. And I'm glad to say we've signed our first contract, and we've just started. So these programs, one of the first things I said when we joined the IPD program was, I've been in so many programs that don't result in work. But the Germans came in determined. And in the first year, we were put in front of clients, which normally happens on the third year, 9th month of the third year, when the program is ending. So in this case, it started in the first year, and we are glad, and we are looking forward to better.
So it's working. At least it's working. So here you can hear it's working. So at least the investment opportunities. And also, before you join, there's another interesting fact I discovered recently about how many of you play games? I'm about to pick on someone. How many of you play games? How many of you have kids who play games? So it's interesting because I discovered recently, thanks to my colleague Yasmin, who works on trade, that in Kenya, games and it's a service industry is classified as a good. It's actually number 10 in terms of the export services that we have. which is very interesting. So in terms of looking at BPO and ITO services, it's not only just the regular ones, there are also other industries. I'll let us stay like 1 minute about it, then I invite Eric to sum it up.
Okay, so thank you so much, Tevin. You caught me by surprise, of course, putting me on the spot here. Yeah, we were just researching and are just exiting from a scoping mission, and we're really getting into research and data, and really found that within the past 18 years, Kenya only added around 15 new products to its export basket. So in terms of diversification, Kenya is actually ranking lower than some of the neighboring countries, I must admit. So even Ethiopia, Tanzania were one of the countries who were diversifying faster and with more products. But it's a bit of a question also of net comparison of data. So we found that apparently games was one of the products that is actually classified as trade in goods. And how I understand it out of a trade perspective is whenever you buy it, it's a good, a product, but whenever it's then also transferred, it converts, and this is the interface to trade in services. So quite a nexus that we see together with the DTC team, with Tevin and colleagues and the EU, where we said we really need to think trade and digital together much more intensely. Thanks, Tevin.
You've heard from different perspectives. So, as from KEPSA, what's your take on this?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Very interesting conversation. I think it could not have come at a better time like now. All the case for the country has been laid out from the perspective of the work that is happening on the regulatory environment, to the work we're doing in terms of capacity building on all different dimensions. So as Kenya Private Sector Alliance, our mandate is to support the country in ensuring that there is conducive business environment that facilitates investments, trade, and promotes job creation. And we've been doing this through ensuring that we enable enterprises to thrive in different sectors. For the last couple of years, we have invested so heavily in looking at new sectors that can generate value for the country by ensuring that there are sectors that can transform at scale, catalyze growth of other industries. And one of the sectors that we have been very, very vocal on is on the digital economy, and particularly on the BPO ITS services. So for the last 3 years, working together with our government colleagues, director and the rest of the team in the Ministry of ICT, as well as other departments in trade, as well as in labor and social protection, we've been looking generally and holistically at ways in which we can accelerate the transformation of this sector. So very interesting things that have happened, apart from the fact that we already now have a business process outsourcing policy almost ready, which is really a very good tool for ensuring that there's predictability and there's structure in the sector. We've also had an opportunity to work with different industry bodies to develop industry associations that can now help in terms of organizing not only just the aspect of advocacy, but also trade promotion, developing standards, ensuring that there's also a business case for building capacity of local operators, connecting them to different organizations that are looking for outsourced services globally, in Europe, and in other destinations. The other thing that has also been quite exciting for us, and something that we're very proud of, is around the talent pipeline and the work that has been done significantly for the last couple of years. And this is really why we are confident that Kenya is really the destination of digital talent, digital hub, but also data transformation and data value chain entrepreneurship. And through this, we've been looking at how do we then organize all this talent in a way that provides value for the country. Some of the work that we've been doing around supporting businesses and enterprises that are doing outsourcing work to access opportunities globally are around creating trade and investment missions. We've also been building capacity of some of the local operators to be able to ensure they access new markets. And it's exciting to see that one of the things that we have continued to talk about is the fact that I don't think our biggest capacity challenge rests with the fact that we don't have credible businesses that can scale and can actually be able to do transactions globally. And the case that Adept Technologies has provided is a really good use case, as well as Mutebe, on how enterprises locally are leveraging and taking advantage of the programs that are in existence to be able now to develop solid capacity to transact globally. The other thing that we've been very keen on, and we are really looking into deepening the ties, is looking at how then do we ensure that all these efforts that we are doing here at scale, at different perspectives, are tracked and put in a dashboard that allows us to know what are the things that we come to this forum. We had very great conversations. Of course, there are business-to-business outcomes, but also at the country level, from the perspective of Kenya Private Sector Alliance, what are these things that we should ensure that we follow through with different actors that are responsible for ensuring that we are moving the country agenda forward and together. So we're very excited, and I think the call to action here is that for us, we are ready for business as a country. All the ingredients that are necessary are in place. The infrastructure is well developed. Of course, there's still gaps to address that. The regulation is evolving rapidly and very responsively. The talent is there. So the only thing that's remaining is for us to do business.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ehud. We are soon going to move towards the discussion on infrastructure, but there's one person in the room who I would like to give the floor briefly as well. As you can see, the BPO sector, IT-enabled services, is going to be an important focus for EU-Kenya cooperation in the next few years, of course, jointly with Germany, but also with our other member states, obviously. An opportunity that there is right now is that we have a working group specifically on BPO and IT-enabled services with private sector that is, for the moment, with German companies, but is also being opened up to other companies from other European member states. If that's of interest, again, come to us and we can connect you to the right people. Chris, thank you for being with us. I know you work on Job Tech Alliance, right? Connecting, basically, working on platforms that connect young Kenyans to job opportunities. What is your perspective on what is required to grow the BPO sector in Kenya? And can you just share your thoughts on what is needed in terms of skilling? Because that is, of course, critical, right, to match demand and supply.
Thanks a lot. And I'm going to challenge the question and not talk about skilling, because I don't think skilling is the issue. I want to talk about the other side. I want to talk about demand. So the Job Tech Alliance is an ecosystem building initiative. We work with over 100 and we do venture support with a number of great companies, including LOA here, and almost all of that is around demand. We've never been asked, oh, help us to solve our skilling problem. We are always being asked, help us to solve our demand problem. And it's great to hear this other example from the import promotion desk. We've been helping a lot of companies on, in some cases, GDPR compliance and stuff like that, but also market linkages, coaching CEOs on sales, helping with marketing collateral. But just to kind of bring it a level up, after helping lots of companies on commercial engagements, we realized there was need to be kind of more strategic. And we've started doing a few things where we believe there's huge opportunity in kind of growing this GBS space. This has included working with governments in source countries. The thing we're actually doing with LOA is working with the government of the Eastern Netherlands to help LOA set up essentially an outsourcing hub or a sales hub in that market to grow sales into the EU. And within that, I think it's critical to remember that digital labor or data, as we're presenting it here, travels not unlike traditional goods, right? It's built on trust, it's built on visibility and repeatable systems. And those trade routes can be very specific. 61% of outsourcing to South Africa comes from the UK. 70% of outsourcing to the Philippines comes from North America. When we talk about the EU, that's 26 countries, but we're really interested in where are the specific trade routes that we can build out. And it's exciting that Germany is kind of leading away and saying, we're trying to build a bit of a trade route here. Maybe it's specific regions. We at the Job Tech Alliance are really interested in the diaspora community. A lot of the outsourcing and GBS communities across the world grew through diaspora links. I think 40% of all of the BPO space in Bosnia is set up by diaspora or ex-diaspora founders. So we really think that the problem is on demand side. It's finding where is the high potential trade routes and really investing in it. And that could come through diaspora, it could come through initiatives like that of Germany, but find where are those trade routes and then try and thicken and thicken and thicken them. Because as soon as we start seeing those trade routes start to thicken, then other people try to copy.
Thank you, Chris. I like being challenged. Thank you for that. We actually had a private sector roundtable recently, like internally, to get views also from European private sector players, and their emphasis was very much on skilling, skilling, skilling. So I'm going to come back to you about this, so we have a coffee and exchange, because it's good to have that perspective. As we work closely with Germany and other EU member states on the BPO sector, we work very closely with our colleagues from Sweden around secure connectivity. And we have the Deputy Ambassador with us today, and I would also like you, Helge, to invite you to say a few words on this topic.
Okay, thank you, Milou. Should I stand up, maybe? No, thanks for that opportunity, and thanks for a great discussion. It's difficult to add a lot of clever inputs at this stage, but I would like to say just a few things, perhaps, on where we are coming from as Sweden into this space, because of course, like has already been mentioned, we see the opportunities when it comes to business and trade, and also when it comes to development. But Kenya is also a partner to Sweden and to Europe in the security space, and data and digital infrastructure is also a critical element when we talk about matters of security. Before I get to what I mean exactly, I just want to say a few things because it's quite interesting from a Swedish perspective this morning when the president was talking about rolling out connectivity to all Kenyans. And he was making his speech right after Thomas Östros, who is the vice president of the European Investment Bank. I don't know if you were there this morning, but Thomas Östros is a former Swedish minister, and he has held several ministerial positions in Sweden, but he was Minister of Education in Sweden in the 90s. At a point where people started to get home PCs and simple dial-up connections. And it was a very luxurious thing to have, and something that only the wealthy household could afford. And very few saw the point of making that big investment in having something like that in the house. As Minister of Education, he thought this should be available to all, so he led a reform that was called the Home PC Reform, where employers could lease out IT equipment, PCs with connectivity to their workers without any taxing or anything like that. So in a few years, millions of households in Sweden that would never had made that investment got access to a home PC with connectivity. And it wasn't the adults who got that thing that used these computers, it was their kids. And it is no coincidence that just a few years later, 5 to 10 years later, some of the big Swedish tech companies started as startups in homes in Sweden. And today we have the highest number of unicorns per capita in the world outside of Silicon Valley. And it comes from this, or at least partly it comes from that reform. So we built, and he was also part of a government that believed a lot in digitalization. And a lot of investments were made to digitalize services and to provide connectivity. Now, all of this background, not to brag, or not only to brag, a little bit, but also to say that we are a highly digitalized society that has enjoyed all of the benefits that we have seen presented here. But in the recent years, we have also felt the pain of what unresilient digital infrastructure can bring. When there are actors out there, both private, it could be hacking communities, but also foreign governments that wish to harm you. If you have data systems and infrastructure that is not secure, you become very vulnerable. We just had last week a big campaign around we have a digital ID system that everyone has in their phone, your digital ID card. It was down for a day, and it created so many problems, and it was an attack on that system. And we are feeling now, after all of this, that we should have made some better investments before, and it becomes very expensive to do it once you realize how insecure your systems are. So we are as part of our diplomatic dialogue with Kenya, trying to raise awareness of this so as not to make the mistakes that we have made, and also share our knowledge and experience in this, both good and bad. And we have Ericsson here, who I think will say something later, that is one of our companies, not a startup, or maybe 150 years ago it might have been it was a startup, because it was one individual who built one of the first phones actually in the world. And we also have, or maybe she's not around anymore, we have another company that is present in Kenya that is called Bergvik, that is building infrastructure for data centers and warehouses. But I think I'll stop there. The point was to raise some caution and to make the right investment decisions when it comes to a resilient and secure infrastructure for data and digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helga. I think the buzzword is security by design, right? Don't think about it as, an afterthought, but think about it as you plan. And I think beyond security, it's also a question of data sovereignty. Do we have control over our data at the level of the individual, at the level of businesses, and also at the level of a country? And I think it's important to think about that right now, because the investments in infrastructure are significant. And they're not easily turned back, obviously, once you make them. We heard, of course, that Ericsson is an important player in this domain. I would like to invite you to say a few words and help us understand what role Ericsson plays in this space, and particularly also in Kenya.
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Deputy Ambassador. Yeah, we have been around for a long time. My name's Ayub Osman. I head up marketing, communications, probably the longest title, sustainability and corporate responsibility for Ericsson, Middle East and Africa. And yeah, we've been around for a long time, 150 years. In Kenya, surprisingly, for 130, when the Kenya-Uganda Railway was being set up. And as you know, my colleague from Nokia has nicely put it, we talk the same language, I think, both being European vendors. And the most important thing for us is, the security in the networks that we provide. As we roll out more 5G networks across Africa and across the globe, you're also having a lot of innovation that comes along with it, which is open interfaces, which can also lead to insecurities in the networks that are providing that connectivity. So it's very important for us to have those secure and trusted networks as we roll out, and it's very important, especially as nations are digitizing more, to ensure that the vendors that you're selecting for digitalizing the networks in the country are also implementing those security solutions and are not high risk. This is very crucial and very important, and you see a lot of countries are paying more and more attention to that because they know that some data leaks, as you've mentioned, can cause havoc If in private companies, I know one of the companies in the UK recently, a supermarket chain, I wouldn't name them, you can Google them, they had a shutdown for almost 4 days, and I think they're probably still shut down, simply because of, a cybersecurity attack. And that can cause, so you can imagine what that can do if you have your national data going out there in the hands of the wrong people. And that could also include, defense-related data, and which is why private networks are also quite important. As we're moving towards 5G, we're now deploying infrastructure and solutions that can actually provide also that additional privacy with 5G slicing, where you can provide dedicated networks, for example, to government entities that require that security of the data. When it comes to cross-border data transactions, we are a mobile financial services provider too, with our Ericsson wallet platform. So a little bit like the M-Pesa, but we have our own solution, which covers almost 36 billion transactions over the year, per year, and about half a billion subscribers in that. And the thing is, because our platform is provided across Africa, we also have those cross-border data issues. So we have to also look at the regulatory environment, and it needs to be supported because you're talking to more than one government. If you've got somebody sitting in Uganda and needs to transact with somebody sitting in Rwanda through, the same network, then you have those challenges where you have to ask yourselves about how do you manage those data securities. So providers such as ourselves, my colleagues from Nokia, are here to really help everyone, ensure that we are providing those secure data networks. So we're here for business too. Thank you.
So as you've heard, they're here for business. So please, let's mingle and do business. So as you've heard from the various speakers, there's something that I think Jasmine alluded to that was very good on, we need to diversify our trade, right? We need to diversify, and digital appears to be the most obvious answer. And we've talked about the opportunities BPO-wise, we've talked about some of the businesses like what Mtembe is doing in terms of that, but all that needs to be underpinned by a secure infrastructure. And perhaps what I keep on asking myself is, what are the challenges that are there? Some of them have been alluded to. Where are we going? But where have we come from? And there's someone I've seen in the room who's been in this industry, I think even before I was born. So he's seen it all. He's seen it since we started when we had, I don't know, what did we used to have, Captain? I think you'll know best. to where we are now and where we are going. So I'd like to hear his views as someone who's been in this industry, especially the infrastructure side of things. Are we achieving secure infrastructure, or are we being hacked, for example, and we don't know?
I'm not sure whether I should thank you or insult you for attacking me. I mean, I'm not as old as Jesus, but obviously, look, I think some of the challenges we've had, and I'll start with security because security is a really big issue. I think the key stakeholders in infrastructure, in Kenya at least, government. So you're looking at the Ministry of ICT, Ministry of Interior, you're looking at NC4, you're looking at the CERT at the the Kenya ICT Authority. Security has perhaps been the bane of our existence in terms of our networks from a security perspective, because it will impact human rights, it will impact our economic competitiveness, it will impact business opportunities, it will impact several things that really will detriment the government's approach towards positioning Kenya as a destination. And so I think without all the players, both in the public sector, government, your network operators, your telcos, your ISPs, your owners of the subsea cables, and I think even the OTTs whom in the last couple of years we've seen getting into the network space by way of rolling out subsea cables crisscrossing the globe because of content and data that needs to be taken across. There needs to be some level of aggression and investment into security. I think security is way up there. I think the other thing that we've struggled with in Kenya is the legislation, the policy keeping pace. Now, certainly within the continent, we are fairly more aggressive than other African countries in trying to get our policies, our statutes to keep pace with infrastructural development. But technology is always outfoxing, outwitting policy. It's unfortunate that even before the session started, the conversation I had was not unfortunate, but in Kenya, it is unfortunate that when we have legislated for certain technological developments, and the statute I have in mind is the Cybercrime Computer Misuse Act. It came from a good place, it was for a particular purpose, but we see a lot of utility of that statute by government seemingly to prosecute freedom of expression. That wasn't the original intent, certainly I think so, in terms of the act. So how do we set out to keep statutes that will give us the advancement that we need, that will say to all and sundry, we are open for business. We are ready for you to come and invest. The statutes are not too prescriptive, but they're keeping pace. On that account, I think it's a good thing that government has, with the help of GIZ obviously, come up with the AI policy, which is really important for us. I think there's a lot more work that needs to go into that. I think the government has shown its deliberateness by publishing the Virtual Assets Bill, which again is a very, very big step for Kenya, saying we want to come to grips with virtual assets that could actually generate a lot of business and opportunities for us as a country. The other aspects that I think we see challenges on remain small businesses, investments that allow them to get into this space. I'm really surprised that a lot of small businesses are not maxing out on the opportunities that exist within partners like GIZ, and I'm glad that she spoke about ADEPT and what's been happening there. Generally, on the whole, I think we are making steps. We're going from Nairobi to Mombasa, whereas we could be down at Voi. We're still at the river. We're still sort of trying to sort out the preliminary issues. I think we do have a very good administration that sort of should provide that kind of leadership. In sum, I think what I'm saying is if security is taken extremely significantly by the government and the private players, and obviously government needs a lot of support because they can't do that on their own, as well as keeping pace with the statutes, the regulations, then the rest is for the private sector to get in and do what they do best, which is to make money and pay taxes.
As you've heard, you make money and you pay taxes, which we've seen from Emery's presentation. If you open up the markets, there's quite a huge opportunity for that. And I think from what you're saying, it's also something that the Deputy Ambassador alluded to. There's that need for collaboration between private and public sector that's really, really needed. And especially in the kind of regulations that we're setting up, are they business friendly? What can we do to further that? And it's some of the discussions we've had even on the data flows. And perhaps to just kind of bring all this to a close, I'm going to pick on two people who are doing something very interesting that kind of, they're trying to encompass everything that we've discussed, from connectivity and infrastructure and how do you build security. They're trying to see how they create the opportunities, and at the same time, they're trying to enable data flows and trying to link Kenya and the EU. And that it's a very interesting thing that they're doing. It's a Kenyan company, Jamii Telco. And before that, I'll also welcome one of my colleagues who's enabling all this. So for the ones who are wondering, what is the concrete business opportunities that this presents? Perhaps I can have him say a few things. Kelly, then also introduce his counterpart that he's working with.
Thank you, Tevin. So I'm not going to speak on behalf of my colleagues who are in the business field, but I'll just give you a very rough description of what we do at the Digital Investment Facility. So basically, we work with project promoters, public, private, through developing financing mechanism, corporate finance, for example, with the private sector, and PPPs with the public sector. And we work under the Global Gateway framework to develop the risking mechanisms. And I'm happy that JTL are here. They are one of our beneficiaries. We are really trying as hard as we can to make sure that we have trustworthy digital infrastructure in the country. And of course, it's linked to other global gateways, but at least for the first node, which we are partnering with JTL, I'll allow him to say a word.
Thank you, Kevin. My name is Ira Sang. I'm from Jamii Telecom. For those who don't know, JTL is one of the telco operators here in Kenya. We primarily were in connectivity, one of the largest fiber operators, and also in the mobile space. And one of the missing links in the discussions with our customers was we need a data center that can then fulfill the full data value chain. I mean, if you get what I'm saying. So we got into partnership with GIZ through their DEEP program, where we are building a data center that is one, compliant from day one with EU standards, and then number two, is ready for investment for FDIs, EU FDIs. So it is structured in a way that fulfills both the security in the infrastructure and then also the readiness for investment from EU partners. Yeah.
Applause for that one. So I think today we've seen examples of it's working. It's working. It's not yet there, but it's working. And you're seeing examples from startups to big entities like Jamii, also from the likes of Nokia from the EU side. So we can see that collaboration it's there. It's not yet, we're not at 100% as he alluded to. We are still at the river. The river is just past here. You just continue down. It's not literally, it's like 10 minutes from here. And Mombasa is like another 500 kilometers. So perhaps I'd like to ask any quick reactions or any points of interest that anyone may have from the overall discussions. I'm curious. Yes, I'm seeing a number of hands. Yes. So we'll start from this side. Yes. Then come.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Johan Kopro. I actually have a couple of hats. I'm French, so that's the EU. I'm a permanent resident of Kenya. That's the Kenya part. I run two institutions. One is regulated by the central bank, so that's the regulatory side. One is a BPO business with software engineers working actually for a couple of companies in Germany as well as other countries. I think it's a very, very interesting discussions, and I think one of my takeaway is both sides have to just be a bit more bullish on the other. I think the work that's been done here is quite fantastic. I think the level of talent of Kenya is fantastic, and from a BPO standpoint, that's something that you need to be proud of and probably be more bullish on. And at the same time, some of the regulatory frameworks you've put in place, some of the European clients are asking, like, what about my data? So that's the discussion from today. Well, trust me, like the data commissioner is on my back on a regulatory basis, whether from a CBK standpoint and from my financial institution, but also from a BPO side. So the setup is there. And from the EU side, looking at, it's not just about the numbers and the youth of the African population, it's actually the talent in Kenya that is available that can help all those businesses. I think the one thing that's very important, and I've seen over the course of my BPO life, is also how do you reduce friction? And so Chris was talking about the trade routes, and how do you reduce friction? How do you create that first case study in that kind of skill set, whether it's a software engineer, whether it's a security engineer, whether it's a data entry, whatever it is, how do you reduce friction? And then from a Kenya side is how do I actually, my talent is good. You can get those individuals to work out with you for 2 weeks, and that's fine. Don't worry, you just try them out, and that's okay. So how do you reduce friction so that both sides can actually just give it a go? And once you give it a go, then you realize it's perfectly working, and you just go with it. So fundamentally, the overarching message is it's a very good discussion, and I'm quite bullish on the back of it for those EU-Kenya partnerships to go on.
That's fantastic feedback. Yes?
Thank you very much. My name is Lydia Kimani. I'm with Agribusiness for African Markets, and we work with women and youth-led enterprises to champion competitiveness by focusing on trade, climate change, and digital inclusion. So presently, I'm working with women in fisheries and blue economy, and just appreciating the depth and the insight that has been shared in this session. And I'm wondering that now that fisheries is one of the priority areas of focus in the EPA, how do the women unpack this kind of next level future conversation, because technology is going to be very critical in enhancing their competitiveness and in accessing EPA. So I think one of my takeaways from here is reach out to the ODPC, the Data Protection and Ministry of ICT, so that we start packaging this information in ways that is palatable to these kinds of constituencies and ensuring that this creates opportunity rather than lead to deeper inequalities going forward. So just to really appreciate this session. Thank you very much.
Any question? Okay. Before we move, that's right. Okay. Coming to the gentleman.
Thank you so much. I'm learning a lot. I'm a research scientist working with the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization. And in our spectrum, we talk about open access. So think about that. As we're talking about data protection, we also are living in a global village where we need to learn from each other, have open source information. I'm also working with Fun and Education Global Network. If you search me out as Dr. Fun Kenya, you'll see what we are doing with students, with learners who are coming up with innovations, addressing especially climate change matters of food security, and they need to learn from each other. I need to connect learners in Kenya with learners in Germany, with learners in any other country. They need to have like a virtual even classroom. So how do you go about regulating this kind of data? And I highly appreciate the data protection in the room, the government arm. I'm sorry, I've been bridging this law because as Dr. Fan, I crisscross the world doing STEM performance, science performance, and all that. So from today, I'm going to adhere to that. Thank you.
You're doing data flows and trade, so they can be lenient on you. We tell them that. So I've seen two more hands. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to share a reflection, having listened to such rich discussion about how free flows of data can really make such a big difference in people's lives. And I think, we started off with that figure of 5%, and I think we've gone so granular in terms of what this can mean for individual businesses. But this conversation is also part of a much bigger conversation as well, in terms of points around sovereignty, around resilience and security, strategic autonomy. And I think what the discussion that's being had now and the outcome of that in terms of where regulations lie, in terms of where agreements around data flows, and critically physical infrastructure, is going to really lay the rails for what Kenya's future is going to be like in a global digital economy. The future of digital trade is changing. And setting those rails right now is going to put Kenya in a really strong place to make the most of that opportunity. And I think, just to come back to the Swedish example, Ericsson's start or work originally in the railroads, and we talk a lot about digital now as the digital railroads of today. Getting that right, we know that we know that the railroads have made such a big difference in national economies. The same is happening right now. So this conversation is so critically important and so part of really big global conversations about where regulations and agreements will set the frame for sovereignty in the future.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Lawrence Tiger. I am a business consultant, and I see opportunity in the room. For me, the question is, once we have opportunity, and you're talking about small and medium-sized enterprises, then how do we create a capacity building or technical expertise to be able to help the fish farmers that have just been identified to actually take initiative to get into this opportunity? Because such conversations are great, but then if you take it 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, you find that the opportunity is there, but the enterprises are not actually taking the opportunity. So I think it would be great to think about, even in the agreement, integration of capacity building in terms of how would they. I know there's an opportunity for me, but I can't reach it because I don't know how to get to it. And that would be something that I think government would take in to be able to bring that element of capacity building, and even getting consultants to think through how to break down that information in a way that the enterprises can actually make use of it. Thank you very much. But wonderful discussion in the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's an excellent point, and I just want to highlight that, of course, we've signed the agreement in December 2023, and since then we've actually done a lot of awareness-raising sessions across the country to explicitly do that, to break down what the economic partnership agreement is, how companies can benefit from that. On the digital space specifically, also hopefully looking ahead towards, let's say, the adequacy dialogue and the adequacy decision in the future, we are working closely with our partners from the DTC, the Digital Transformation Center, to also invest in that readiness, right? Make sure that businesses are prepared, understand how they can tap into these opportunities. Of course, as you say, government has an incredibly important role in that as well. As EU, we cannot take that responsibility on our own, but it is definitely an area where we are in the next years going to focus on, because what we have seen is that since the signing of the EPA, we heard it this morning, there's a significant increase in trade volumes. I think it's a percentage of 13-14% already, and that's within a year's time. But it is not the ceiling. And to be able to close that gap, we indeed need to invest in awareness, capacity, as you say. So thank you very much for pointing that out, incredibly important point. Tevin, please do us the honors of wrapping this incredibly rich conversation up. I know Ambrice has summarized it more or less,
exactly.
But let's see what
I don't know what to summarize. I think everything has been, I don't want to spoil the conversation. So thank you, everyone. We've kept you for 2 hours, and you managed to engage with us for 2 hours. That's impressive. Most of you are not on social media. So we've done something right, Milo and I. Give us a clap. Give us a clap. We've done something right. So thank you, everyone, for attending. This is just the beginning. As you've said, we're just trying to explore how all this is interlinked, and I'm sure going forward now we'll just continue having those conversations and creating more of those opportunities. So thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Oh, before I forget, I was told tomorrow there are 2 events that may be of interest to some of you in the room. One will be for the European companies. There's a session on how to do business in Kenya. And for everyone, there's a session on IP after that, on intellectual property and how does that work between Kenya and the EU. Yeah, thank you very much.